Okay, welcome viewers. We're getting closer to the end. We're on to the finish line, the cost of legislative experimentation. Lesson 8, Episode 8, Outline 8. When created categories and constructed identities collide. I do want to remind you, I do these outlines for a reason. I want to try and get this as specific as I can, and if I need to read it, I will. 9 times out of 10, I need to read it. So come with me on this journey. We're nearly there. I'm getting feedback. People are getting set free. They're seeing things clearer now. It's not blurred. People are getting healed. When created categories and constructed identities collide, the conflict's no longer hidden. Sal Grover, Kira Lee Smith. At great expense. They're going to die on the hill. It looks like they're going to die on the hill. And the conflict's no longer hidden. Biological sex and gender identity now stand inside the same legal room. One's created, one's constructed. One's embodied, one's declared. One existed before Parliament. One was granted statutory force by Parliament. I'm going to say that again. One existed before Parliament, before there was even a Australian Parliament there. One was granted statutory force by the Parliament in 2013. So the collision begins when law treats both as governing authorities over the same female boundary. And that's not legit. That's not legit. There's been an intrusion into Parliament that's found its way into the law that's now come to take over womanhood. We know they're come to take over womanhood because they're standing over women now. And no. Now, the 2013 framework did not merely introduce another protected architecture or attribute. It placed created biological governance and constructed identity governance into the same co-mutual authority. Okay. Before this law come in, women had authority. You stop there. Now the 2013 law has given governance to the biological and identity groups co-mutual authority. This is the problem. This is the paradox. The law did not erase sex. It placed sex beside identity. It placed biology beside identity instead of leaving biology above identity. Then it expected one protected boundary to obey both. A created category does not require Parliament to exist. The biological woman does not require Parliament to exist. But the identity category does. Male and female precede statute. They precede policy. They precede bureaucracy. They precede courts. The original sex-based architecture recognized the reality and attached protections to it. Female spaces existed because female embodiment mattered. Female sport existed because female bodies mattered. Female privacy existed because female bodily sex mattered. Female recovery existed because sex trauma and vulnerability mattered. And that was created category governance. Then constructed identity entered the same legal architecture. Gender identity was not merely acknowledged socially, it was given legal standing. 2013. It became a protected attribute capable of making claims inside the biological framework. And that's where the paradox sharpens. If gender identity is protected generally, the question becomes manageable. But if gender identity claims authority over boundaries created because biological sex matters, the legal system is no longer simply protecting dignity. I'll read that again. But if gender identity claims authority over boundaries created because biological sex matters, the legal system is no longer simply protecting dignity. It is allowing a constructed identity category to contest the governing force of a created biological category. And that's why many women sense something deeper than policy disagreement. They sense category displacement. They're told sex remains protected, yet they observe identity now claiming standing inside sex-based spaces. They're told women remain protected, yet they observe the word woman becoming governed by more than female biology. They're told the boundary remains, yet they observe the boundary being asked to recognise a second authority. This is a collision, not confusion, not mere ambiguity, a paradoxical co-government structure. 2013, that amendment was a paradoxical co-governance structure. Two governors, one boundary, competing definitions, competing claims, competing legal consequences. Once that occurs, the boundary cannot remain psychologically settled. The woman relying on it no longer only asks, does the boundary exist? She asks, which authority will govern these boundaries when they're challenged? And that question changes everything, viewers. The collision, closing statement for this lesson, the collision between created categories and constructed identities is the unresolved centre of this modern dispute. The issue is not whether transgender people possess legal protection. The law's made that clear, they do. The issue is whether constructed identity should co-govern boundaries originally created because biological sex matters. Because once female boundaries forced to obey two competing governors, the conflict no longer sits outside the law. It sits inside the law itself, and it's sat there since 2013. I'll see you in the next lesson.